Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jeannie Rosner. I'm so happy that you could be here. I am the founder and the person behind Soul Food Salon, where our mission is to educate and empower us all to be healthier, with ultimately the planet benefiting. We hold monthly events featuring different health and wellness experts, and we try to alternate with a talk and a cooking event. And they were historically in person, now they've been virtual, and we're going to go into some kind of hybrid concept pretty soon, which I'll share with you in a few minutes. This is our 8th year. I have a website, soulfoodsalon.com. Check it out. Everything that we've done in these 8 years is there. Past presentations, anything we've written is all available. So spend some time there. You can learn a lot. I'm pretty active on social media, mainly Instagram, and that's at Soul Food Salon. Follow along for some inspiration, hopefully. And we have a YouTube channel. Again, that's Soul Food Salon as well. Many of our salons have been recorded. Today's salon will be recorded, and it will be up on our YouTube channel probably tonight or tomorrow morning. I will send out an email to those who are on my email list to receive the direct link to the salon. So you could subscribe to my email list if you want through my website, again, soulfoodsalon.com. At the very top of the page, there's a little link that you can use. So each year I partner with a different nonprofit. This year I partnered with Fresh Approach, and we are helping spearhead their mobile farmers market in Redwood City. So far, because of donations from you all, we've raised almost $13,000, which is fabulous. And the first mobile farmers market event will be on Thursday of next week. You can still make donations throughout the year to Fresh Approach, and you can do that through my website. Again, it's soulfoodsalon.com. The main page, the About page in the middle, talks about our partner, and you can make a donation through that. So our next salon is on Wednesday, November 10th, and it's featured, we're featuring Linda Shu. She's an MD chef. This is her cookbook, and it's actually going to be an in-person cooking event. We're going to do like kind of a little hybrid where we're going to, hopefully the technology will work where we will have people come and it will be in person. And then we'll also have a link to register an RSVP to do a virtual, live virtual viewing. So hopefully that technology will work, and I will be sending out the email about that salon shortly. So today I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Robert Lustig. He is Emeritus Professor of Pediatrics in the Division of Endocrinology at UCSF. He is a mastermind in metabolism. He's written many books. His most recent book is Metabolical, which is the theme of today's salon. He is a leader in the current anti-sugar movement. His video, Sugar, the Bitter Truth, on YouTube has over 14 million views. And if you haven't had a chance to watch it, I recommend it. I've watched it I'm probably about 5 or 6 of those views. I take notes every time. I learn something new. I think Dr. Lustig is masterful at taking really complex science, bringing it down to a level that we can hopefully all understand, and then giving us actionable ways to combat perhaps the negatives of the things that he's talking about. So I highly recommend watching that video. Dr. Lustig is also the Chief Science Officer of the nonprofit Eat Real, and that is how we came to have this salon today, through Nora Latour, who is their CEO. So the format of today is Dr. Lustig is going to do his presentation with slides. Then Nora and I will come on, and Nora is going to share a little bit about Eat Real. And then Dr. Lustig and I will do our Q&A. He has a hard stop at 12 p.m. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as we can. So I'm going to sign off, and I'm going to let Dr. Lustig sign on, and we're in for a treat.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. So appreciate it. And thank you all for coming today. I also appreciate that. I'm going to talk to you today about what's in this book that Jeannie showed, called Metabolical. And very specifically, we're going to talk about the difference between processed food and real food, and why processed food is the problem. And I think a lot of people think that processed food is food. I'm going to disavow you of that notion by the end of today. So I do have these disclosures. I did write these books for the general public, Metabolical being the one we're talking about today. In addition, I am Chief Medical Officer of these 4 startups and a paid advisor to these other 4 startups. I will not be speaking about any of these companies or products, and everything that I will be saying is in the literature and is readily available, and there's no conflict of interest. All right. Now, you're all aware we have a healthcare crisis. All right. And the healthcare crisis is not just ours, it's the entire world's. In fact, the prevalence of diabetes has tripled over the past 20 years. There are now more obese people walking the earth than undernourished people. And Medicare will be broke by the year 2029 because of the monies that we spend on chronic metabolic disease. Despite all the attention and all the effort and all of the money that has gone into managing these diseases, the fact of the matter is we have absolutely not made even a dent in this. And worse yet, we are actually now seeing a reduction in lifespan here in the United States. If you look at this slide, which plots health expenditures versus life expectancy, you can see all the other countries in the OECD, the 37 developed countries. And, you know, none of them are doing as well as they used to over time. But take a look at us, and we've just completely fallen off the rails as early as 1975 to 1980, where we spend more and die earlier. And this continues its inexorable decline. And it is now breaking the medical bank, such that, in fact, Morgan Stanley now predicts that we will be at 0.0% economic growth by the year 2035 if we continue on our current course. This is an unmitigated disaster. And the question, of course, is why is this happening? And why did this start about 45 years ago? So the inconvenient truth of all of this is that you cannot fix healthcare until you fix health. You cannot fix health until you fix diet. And you cannot fix diet until you know what the hell is wrong. And the problem is that for the last 50 years, we've been barking up the absolute wrong tree. We have basically said the problem is calories. The problem is saturated fat. And we have modified our diet to reduce calories and reduce saturated fat. In the meantime, we now have a pandemic of obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, dyslipidemia, cancer, dementia, hypertension, polycystic ovarian disease, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. These were all diseases that didn't even exist, really, until the 20th century, and really were kind of rare until 1975, when all of these have just completely spiraled out of control. So the temporal relation between the change in our diet and the change in these diseases is absolutely clear. The question is, what happened and what did we do, and why does this continue despite our best efforts? Now, people think this is about obesity. You get fat, you get sick. All right? And most of my medical colleagues and most of Jeannie's medical colleagues believe this. And of course, this is what's promulgated by the National Academy of Medicine, by the National Institutes of Health, by the CDC, by the Surgeon General, by the White House, by Congress, and by the food industry. You get fat, you get sick. It's about obesity. I am here to tell you this is not true. This is a blatant, provable falsehood. All right, and it is on this slide. Here we have what are known as MRI fat fraction maps. That is, cuts through the abdomen and chest of 3 different people. Okay, the first one on the left here, you can see obese. Notice the love handles here. But what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at this guy's liver here in the red circle. It's dark. Very little fat, only 2.6% liver fat. This guy is what we would call MHO, metabolically healthy obese. We actually study these people to try to figure out how come they didn't get sick. They will live a completely normal life, die at a completely normal age, not cost the taxpayer a dime. They even have normal length telomeres, the edges of the chromosomes that unravel and determine when your cells die and then when you die. These people are not costing the system any money whatsoever, and these people will likely outlive you. They're just fat. Conversely, let's take the center slide. Okay, here's a guy who's obese. You can notice the love handles on the sides, of course. And now take a look at this guy's liver. Notice a ground glass appearance, 24% liver fat. This guy has metabolic syndrome. This guy has non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. This guy has all of the makings of these chronic metabolic diseases that I just listed off. And these diseases are basically what is breaking the medical bank. So we would, instead of calling this guy fat healthy, this guy is fat sick. This is what, you know, the NIH and the CDC are basically railing about. But now let's take a look at the guy here on the right. Notice, no love handles, pretty normal, but take a look at his liver, 23% liver fat. This guy on the right is just as sick as this guy in the center. Thin sick, fat healthy. So it turns out it's not the fat you can see that counts. It's the fat you can't see. It's the fat in your muscles. It's the fat in your organs. It's particularly, now we know, the fat in your liver. And that fat in the liver can be in many people. In fact, 45% of the entire US adult population now has fatty liver disease. Considering non-alcoholic fatty liver disease was only coined as a term in 1980 when the first patients first showed up with it. Before that, if you had fat in your liver, you were an alcoholic. And now 45% of adults and 25% of children now have fatty liver disease, and children don't drink alcohol. So what is causing this fatty liver? Because when your liver gets sick, then your pancreas has to make extra insulin to make the liver do its job. And when that happens, then there's extra insulin all over the body to drive weight gain and to drive chronic metabolic disease in all the different various organs, because insulin, it turns out, is the bad guy. Well, it turns out that fat in that liver, which is the driver of all these chronic metabolic diseases, is because of our addiction, and I use that word very specifically, our addiction to ultra-processed food. Now, what is ultra-processed food? Well, it's food made by any of the 10 conglomerates that basically control 90% of our food supply. If a food has a label, it's been basically, it's from one of those companies. If it has a logo that you've heard of, it's from one of those companies, right? The question is, they tell us that ultra-processed food is food. My question, is that true? Is ultra-processed food food? Well, in order to answer that question, you actually have to know the definition of food. Well, and here's the definition right out of Webster's. Substrate that contributes either to the burning or growth of an organism. Burning or growth of an organism. I accept that. That's a perfectly fine definition of the word food. All right, so that's my question. Does ultra-processed food contribute to either burning or growth? Well, as it turns out, the answer is no. So glucose, which is the energy of life over here on the right, okay, glucose, which is in starch, it's in grains, it's in, lots and lots of different foodstuffs that we eat. Actually, tell your mitochondria, the little energy burning factories inside your cells, to work faster and to work better. And the reason is because glucose activates an enzyme in your cells called AMP kinase. And AMP kinase is like the fuel gauge on the cell and tells the cell how much energy it's got. And when the energy goes down, then mitochondria have to basically jump to attention and make extra energy. And so we'll burn extra glucose in the mitochondria through this process called beta oxidation. And so you can see that when you add glucose to mitochondria, you increase the rate of beta oxidation, which increases the amount of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the chemical energy that all cells use to power themselves and to stay alive. In addition, glucose activates this enzyme here called HADH, hydroxyacyl-CoA dehydrogenase. So in other words, glucose basically is like the spurs that kick the mitochondria in the butt and tell the mitochondria to work harder and generate more energy for cellular use. So glucose is food. But this other molecule over here, fructose. Now, fructose is the sweet molecule in sugar. Fructose is the reason we love sugar. Fructose is, in fact, addictive. And we have the data to actually demonstrate that, in fact, fructose stimulates the reward center in the same way that cocaine, heroin, nicotine, alcohol do. Well, it turns out not only does fructose stimulate the reward center and in the extreme is addictive, but it turns out fructose has very specific effects on the mitochondria that actually inhibit burning. Fructose inhibits count them, three separate enzymes that are necessary for normal mitochondrial beta oxidation. It inhibits AMP kinase. So basically, it throws sand in the fuel tank. Number two, it inhibits ACAD-L, acyl-CoA dehydrogenase long chain. And lastly, it inhibits this enzyme here called CPT1A, carnitine palmitoyl transferase 1A, which is the enzyme that regenerates carnitine, which is the shuttle mechanism by which fats get into the mitochondria so that they can be beta oxidized. So fructose, this sweet molecule in sugar, this addictive molecule that's been put in all of our food on purpose, actually inhibits energy burning. All right, and ultra-processed food is sugar-laden food. This has been shown in a different way in humans by Kevin Hall at the NIH, where he basically put people in a room calorimeter, room bomb calorimeter, where it measures the carbon dioxide that you breathe off and then can figure out how much energy you're burning. And he basically fed them for 2 weeks, either an unprocessed diet or an ultra-processed diet that was matched for everything: calorie, sugar, fat, fiber, macronutrients, et cetera. And what it showed was that when they went on the diet, the ultra-processed food diet, they actually ended up increasing their intake and their weight gain compared to when they were on an unprocessed food diet, when they actually reduced their food intake and demonstrated weight loss. So, in fact, ultra-processed food inhibits burning and contributes to body weight. Now, what about growth? Remember, there are two parts to the definition of food. Well, my colleague, Dr. Efrant Monsenigo-Ornan, who's chairman of the Department of Nutrition at Hebrew University, Jerusalem, just published this paper about 3 months ago, which demonstrates that ultra-processed food actually inhibits bone growth. You can see the cortical bone here in red in the control situation, but in the ultra-processed food and with calorie-laden soft drinks, you can see how much thinner it is. On X-ray, you can see how much paler it is. And actually in cross-section, you can see how much bone has been lost. And in fact, ultra-processed food doesn't just inhibit growth, it actually hijacks growth to increase cancer incidence. And so this is a study in humans done in Europe, showing that every 10% increase in ultra-processed food consumption leads to a 12% increase in cancer rates. Okay, and this is this ultra-processed food quartile here, quartile 4, shows an increase in cancer incidence. So bottom line, ultra-processed food does not contribute to burning, it inhibits it. Ultra-processed food does not contribute to growth, it inhibits it or hijacks it, but certainly not to normal growth. Thus, in fact, ultra-processed food does not meet the criterial definition for food. In fact, ultra-processed food is poison. Poison. Now, the food industry won't tell you that. The NIH won't tell you that. CDC won't tell you that. But in fact, that is in fact what's going on. And I wrote this article several years ago, 4 years ago now, Processed Food, an Experiment That Failed. In fact, we switched our diets 50 years ago to ultra-processed food for cost, for convenience, for coolness, for taste, etc. And the bottom line is that's when the diseases started adding up. In fact, 56% of all the food sold in America today is ultra-processed. It accounts for 62% of the sugar in the American diet and 67% of the sugar in kids' diets. And the reason that the food industry adds it is because they know when they add it, you buy more, because it's addictive. Now, it's not addictive to everyone. There are plenty of people who can, pick up a soda and put it down. But about 20% of people can't. All right. And that's about the same as for alcohol. Because in the extreme, sugar is addictive. And you can see that it's been added surreptitiously to virtually all of our foods, beverages, various, cakes, candies, ice creams, things you would identify as desserts, fruits and vegetables, breakfast cereals, meat, fish, eggs, dairy products, salty snacks, etc. Bottom line, there's a reason that they added it. And it's because they know when they add it, you buy more. And we actually have an economic version of this. It's called price elasticity. So price elasticity is an economic concept that says that the higher the price goes, the less you should buy. The question is, how much less? And the answer is, for sugary products, it doesn't change much at all. The three most price inelastic products are fast food, soft drinks, and juice. So, in fact, we have an economic argument that, in fact, sugar is indeed addictive. So here's what our sugar consumption has done over the course of the last 200 years. Our ancestors, getting fruits and vegetables with the occasional honey out of the ground, consumed about 5 pounds of sugar per year, which is fine because your liver can handle up to about 25 grams a day. So if you multiply that by 365 days a year, basically you're talking about, somewhere on the order of about 5 pounds of sugar per year that you can manage. Well, here's the growth of the sugar industry in the late 1800s with C&H and Domino and Texas, Louisiana, Hawaii. And then we reached stabilization when price equaled demand here prior to World War II. And you can see World War II's rationing here. Okay, and then it came back up to about the same level. And here's the advent of ultra-processed food here around 1965, when things really sort of took off. That's, the breakfast cereal craze that I lived through as a child. And then in 1975, we had the substitution of high fructose corn syrup for sugar because high fructose corn syrup is cheaper because it's homegrown. And also the Dietary Guidelines of 1977, which said, eat less fat. Well, when we ate less fat, we needed to do something to make the food taste like food, because otherwise when you take the fat out, it tastes like cardboard. And so what they do, they added sugar. And so we've increased our consumption of sugar by 25-fold over the course of the last 200 years. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to overlay on this slide the percent of GDP in the United States spent on healthcare for the same period of time. What do you see? When ultra-processed food came into our world, that's when healthcare costs started to climb out of control. And the problem is that there's no fix for this because there's no medicine that gets to the mitochondria. There's no mitochondrial tonic. There's no mitochondrial medicine. The only thing you can do is reduce the substrate. the substrate that basically poisons it. Get rid of the poison. Unfortunately, that's not what processed food is. In fact, Harvard just published a paper demonstrating using what's known as advanced Markov modeling, a new economic model, demonstrates that we can prevent disease, these chronic metabolic disease in millions of Americans, and basically recoup virtually 1/2 of the monies spent on chronic disease today, if we just got our sugar down to USDA guidelines. But we don't, because sugar is addictive and the food industry knows it. So the question is, what should you eat? Well, you should eat a healthy diet. Well, what's a healthy diet? Depends on who you ask. So what's the definition of healthy? We've already defined food. Let's define healthy. You know, Michael Pollan famously, in his New York Times Magazine article and in his book, Food Rules, famously said, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. I got a problem with all those. All three of those clauses are wrong. Eat food. Well, you know, first of all, some people think processed food is food. I've already shown you, no, that's not true. And some people need a low-fat diet. Other people need a high-fat diet. So eat food doesn't really answer the question of what kind of food is food. Number two, not too much. You know, that doesn't take into account this mitochondrial dysfunction. It also doesn't take into account fiber. And fiber is the thing that makes it not too much. And if you eat your food with its inherent fiber, you will not eat too much. So you don't have to actually plan that. It takes care of itself. And then finally, mostly plants. Well, you know, Coke, Doritos, and Oreos are all plant-based. They're all vegan. So mostly plants doesn't work either. And in fact, there are animal products that are actually kind of good for you, like omega-3 fatty acids. You don't find that really in plants very much. My point is that it's not what's in the food. It's actually what's been done to the food, and really what they did to the food that matters. And of course, they're the ones telling you that what they did to the food is actually helpful. What I'm telling you is that that's actually not the case. And the problem is that what they did to the food isn't listed on the food label. So you can't figure out by looking at the label as to whether or not any individual food that you find in the grocery store is healthy, except if there is no label. Because if there is no label, that means nothing was done to the food. Because only food that had something done to it needs a label. That's an FDA rule. So in fact, you should look at all food labels as warning labels, because that means that they did something to it. Now, they may have done something very minor to it. Like, for instance, if you buy apple slices, they may have just destemmed and deseeded it. And, you know, the apple slices themselves are perfectly okay. So that is what we would call minimally processed food. Okay. Or they may have done something more, like they might have added sugar, which would, you know, like applesauce. Okay. That would be moderately processed food. Or they could have done something completely different, like, you know, an apple fruit leather or an apple pie, in which case that's, you know, a different story entirely. So there are different levels of processing. And the book goes into what those are and how those work and why it's only the ultra processed food category that's a problem. So how do you determine what's healthy? I'm going to suggest 2 principles, 6 words. Michael Pollan said 7. I'm going to say 6. And instead of 3 clauses, just 2. And here they are. Protect the liver, feed the gut. Protect the liver from what? Well, protect the liver from sugar, from refined carbohydrate, things that overwhelm the liver's capacity. Protect the liver from glyphosate, you know, Roundup. Protect the liver from heavy metals, which we now know are a big deal in baby foods. So there are a lot of things to protect the liver from. And then feed the gut. Feed the gut what? Well, feed the gut fiber, because fiber is the food for your bacteria. Now, you have 10 trillion cells in your body, but you have 100 trillion bacteria in your intestine. Your bacteria outnumber you 10 to 1. You are just a big bag of bacteria with legs. All right. Now, those bacteria have to eat something to survive. They have to make their own ATP. Right. So the question is, what do they eat? Well, they eat what you eat. The question is, how much did you get versus how much did they get? And it turns out that fiber is not food for you. We don't have the enzymes in our intestine to break down fiber into its components and absorb them, but the bacteria do. So when you eat your food with its requisite fiber, which came as food, out of the ground, you are actually feeding your gut, and you are feeding your gut to increase microbial diversity. And then, because if you don't feed your bacteria will feed on you. Bacteria will actually strip the mucin layer right off your intestinal epithelial cells, exposing and denuding your intestine. You can actually see this on electron microscopy, the bacteria actually sitting on your intestinal epithelial cells and generating toxins, which then cause leaky gut, which cause irritable bowel syndrome, which cause inflammatory bowel disease, can lead to autoimmune disease because various components of the food pass through the intestine into your bloodstream and then generate an immune response. So the bottom line is, in order to promote metabolic health, you have to protect the liver primarily from sugar, and you have to feed the gut primarily with fiber. Okay, that's healthy. Now, any food that does both is healthy. Any food that does neither is poison. Any food that does one or the other but not both is somewhere in the middle. And actually, the empiric data that's out there actually supports that contention. So processed food is high sugar, low fiber. Real food is low sugar, high fiber. Processed food generates big glucose spikes and therefore big insulin spikes. Now, low carb diets, as you can see, generate a much lower glucose spike because there's no carb to generate a glucose spike. But notice a high fiber diet actually does almost, if not as well, as a low carb diet. And so you have all these people, yelling keto, but you also have all these people yelling vegan. And the fact of the matter is, they both work. And the reason they work is because they keep the glucose excursion down, they keep the insulin response down, they keep the chronic metabolic disease drivers at bay. So vegan or keto, I don't care. The point is, keep your insulin down, and you do it by protecting your liver and feeding your gut. That's how you do it. So Hippocrates famously said, "Let thy food be thy medicine." Yeah, but Hippocrates never met McDonald's. Okay. What I think he would have said had he lived today is, good food is medicine, and bad food needs medicine. Now, having said that, our kids are exposed to the worst food on the planet. And in fact, schools in America are the biggest fast food franchise in the world. And that's all they are eating is ultra processed food. And the question is, what are we going to do to help kids? And this is one of the reasons that Jordan Schlein, a concierge physician in San Francisco, and I started the nonprofit Eat Real many years ago. And Nora Latore is our CEO. And she's going to talk to you just for a couple of minutes about why Eat Real exists and why our kids need this, and hopefully what you can do to help. Nora, you want to take it away?
So thank you so much, Dr. Lustig. And I think you hit home what exactly processed food, and particularly sugar, with the impact that has on our health. And what I'm going to be talking about a little bit more is how the impact that has on our children's health and what we can do about it. And we really see school meals as one of the most significant platforms for innovation and one of the best solutions to changing this direction that you explained to us so clearly. And so I'm really excited to talk to you because our nonprofit Eat Real is 100% focused on increasing real food access for our children and helping them learn to love real food so we can change the direction of the health trajectory of our children and our planet, because often what's healthier for our kids is often healthier for our planet too. So I'm going to just quickly share a little bit about the nonprofit because there are lots of ways then that people can get involved in our nonprofit to apply some of these learnings that we just had through your presentation. So like I said, Eat Real is a public health nonprofit that was founded by Dr. Lustig and Dr. Slane and some leading health advocates, Lawrence Williams from SpaceX, that really believed in shaping a healthier future, and with the belief that healthy food for children makes a better future for us all. And so these are just some of the most recent stats that we pulled of how now this food news is making headlines about the impact of processed food on our children's health. And so these are just, and this is like just in the last few weeks, month. And so you can see from the news headlines that it's getting worse before it can, and but we believe it can get better. So we know that especially, even COVID, especially during COVID, this has been accelerated, and there's been even more limited access to healthy food for kids. I'm not going to read these off, but you can take a minute and read these. These are some of the latest cutting edge research and news about how important it is to give kids and make sure that they have access to really real food that feeds your gut and protects your liver. We really focus at our nonprofit of shifting health with kids and children and young adults, and because we believe that that's where there's tons of exposure, and that's where also we believe that you can make a lot of impact. And we actually focus on partnering with schools to change the direction of health. I'm not going to dive too much into this slide, but we really believe that we have to change what's on the plate. And to change what's on the plate, we chose to work with, in our nonprofit, primarily we work with schools because, as Dr. Lustig said, they're the largest restaurant chain in America. There's one in almost every single community. And it can be 30% to 100% of a child's nutrition in a day. It's where education happens. It's where they need good food in order to learn and grow and thrive. And so we really believe that within our food system, by partnering with schools and making healthy meals accessible there, we can really change this, right the ship. And so just really quick about our nonprofit. So we actually have an Eat Real school certification program that we're building with some of the top leaders in school food. They're helping us evolve our program. And so we actually will work with an entire school district. So you can get your school district involved, and we will partner with them. And it's really about us empowering the school district to make these changes. We're not coming in, we're not sourcing the food for them. We're just helping them understand how they can move towards more real food and move away from highly processed items and source better. And so we actually will assess a school district against our rigorous science-based standards that define nutrition and sustainability. And we will give them a score. We'll help them create an action plan that they customize. And then we'll help roll up our sleeves with them, meet with suppliers, make changes, and then we'll reassess and continue the partnership and keep having their backs on making changes and engaging students in those changes as well. And one example of what does it mean? Okay, you get Eat Real certified in a school district. What does that result in? Well, it works. And we believe that it works at scale. Our program has a growing wait list. And just to show one example of a school district we've worked with Mount Diablo Unified, which is an awesome leading school district. And they removed, through our assessment and our partnership, removed 10 pounds of sugar per student per year. Imagine a 10-pound bag of sugar and cutting that from a student's diet. And also then how much better they can focus. They're not getting spiked with sugar without the day, how that impacts their mental health, et cetera. And so we also eliminated some really harmful toxic ingredients in their food items. We worked with their vendors to do that. And now that their vendors are offering cleaner products to multiple school districts, which is really exciting. We slashed ultra processed food items. We helped them increase plant-rich, minimally processed plant-based items. They're sourcing more regeneratively. They're scratch cooking more. They're starting to reduce more food waste. And we train staff. It goes on and on. And so it really can be transformative for a school district. And this is happening across California and across the nation. And then this is just a little bit more. We do have a very rigorous approach when we are partnering, and it's very science-based and data-driven. And we are on a mission right now to reach 200,000 students this fall, largely in California, but also nationally, as I mentioned. And we want to keep expanding across the Bay Area, across California, and across the nation. And we really believe that between our work with schools, and we also do policy and advocacy, that we can really start to change the health trajectory of our kids. So in terms of how you can get involved, you can keep this conversation going with us. So we'd love for you to sign up for our newsletter. We often feature different talks and news and stats from Dr. Lustig, who is our Chief Science Officer. You can follow us on social media. We're at Eat Real Certified, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can LinkedIn me. You can become an ongoing donor. We're looking for support. We're trying to raise $750,000 right now, so we can work with as many schools as possible this fall. And so you can help us do that. And you know, $10 can help multiple students have access to healthy food at school all year round. So even a small donation really does make a difference. And you can tell other people about the work that we're doing, about Dr. Lustig's presentation. You can share this YouTube video, and you can invite others to get involved in the Eat Real movement. We really see that this is a movement and that you all are going to be a part of building it. And upcoming, you're hearing it first, we're just announcing this soon, we're doing a 7-day sugar challenge with all the YMCAs of California. If you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get an invite where the page will be live later this month, but we'd love for you to join us. Mark your calendars for November 8th and sign up for our newsletter at eatreal.org to join that 7-day sugar challenge. You'll get some support from Dr. Lustig along the way, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think we'll all experience how reducing sugar, how pervasive it is in our food, and then also how reducing sugar really is a mood booster. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for your time and learning more about Eat Real. I'll pass it back to Jeannie, and I know that together we can start to put our children's health first and our own health too. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. That was awesome. I think the 7-day challenge will be a challenge, but it will be, well, very needed, I think, for all of us to be mindful and cognizant of how often we put sugar in our bodies.
Well, it's how often we put sugar in our kids' bodies.
Yeah.
That can be a great family challenge, where that's what we're going to be doing at my house.
Great. All right. So I have a couple questions to kick this off. And I know Dr. Lustig, I believe you've answered a few in the Q&A already. So I might know some of these answers, but I want my audience to understand it. So if someone has fatty liver disease, will they know it?
No, not until they end up with cirrhosis and need a liver transplant or die. That's part of the problem. Is just like hypertension, fatty liver disease is a silent killer. So there are 3 stages of fatty liver disease. The first is just fat in the liver. And that usually happens when there's only about 5% of fat in the liver. During this stage where there's only fat in the liver, it is eminently and completely reversible. So you can get rid of it. And by cutting sugar out of your diet, you can basically reverse that fatty liver almost alone. We did that in children. We took 43 children from our obesity clinic at UCSF. We studied them on their home diet. And then what we did was we catered their meals for 10 days, no added sugar. Okay, so we took the percent of sugar in their diet from 28% down to 10%. We gave them fruit, but otherwise no added sugar. And it wasn't funky food, it was Safeway food. All right, but it was no added sugar food. Now, if you do that, you're going to take 350 to 400 calories per day out of the diet, in which case they might lose weight. We didn't want the patients to lose weight because if they lost weight, then the critics would say, well, of course they got better, they lost weight. We wanted them to stay the same weight or even gain weight. So we had to replace the 350 to 400 calories in sugar with something else that was equicaloric. We gave them extra starch. So it wasn't good food, it was crappy food. Okay, I mean, in the vernacular, we took the pastries out, we put the bagels in. We took the sweetened yogurt out, we put the baked potato chips in. We took the chicken teriyaki out, we put the turkey hot dogs in. So we didn't give them good food. We gave them processed food, ultra processed food for that matter, but it was no added sugar food. And we gave them a scale, and every day we'd call them up on the phone, what'd you weigh? And if they were losing weight, eat more in order to keep their weight constant, again, because we didn't want them to lose weight. And then we studied them 10 days later. Their liver fat went down by 22% in just 10 days with no change in calories and no change in weight. And their pancreases started making insulin properly based on the fact that the liver fat was reduced because now the liver was working right. So that's stage one, when you can basically reverse the liver fat. Stage two is another story. What happens then is that the fat in the liver starts causing inflammation and starts causing fibrosis. And that's known as non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, or NASH. And that stage, once the fibrosis starts, you can't reverse that. Then it's scarred for life. The just question is, how bad is it going to get, and will it be bad enough to kill you? And by the time you reach stage three, now you've got full-blown cirrhosis, and you're going to either need a liver transplant or you're going to die of it. So the goal is to catch it in stage one. Now, of the 45% of adults who have fatty liver disease, okay, 90% of them are in stage one. So they can fix it if they change their diets.
Interesting. What is your view? How does intermittent fasting affect metabolism?
Right.
And are you a fan of that?
Yeah, so a lot of people are intermittently fasting now. You know, Walter Longo at University of Southern California, popularized this and written books on it. And lots of people are, touting it. Jason Fung and bunches of people. The question is, why does it work? It does work, but why does it work? And the answer is, we have the data to show. The reason it works is because you're giving the liver a chance to burn off the fat that accumulated in the previous 16 hours. That's why it works, is because by starving your liver for 16 hours, your liver has to then reach into that fat and burn it off. And so what you're doing is you're basically losing the fat that you gained in that liver. Okay. And that's a good thing to do. And I'm not suggesting it's not. It is a good thing to do. The question is, why did that fat end up in the liver in the first place? If you ate a good diet, if you ate a real food diet, you wouldn't have accumulated that fat in the liver to begin with, in which case you wouldn't need to intermittently fast. So yes, intermittent fasting can fix the problem, but ultimately the goal is to prevent the problem. And the only way to prevent the problem is by not consuming the substrate that causes it, which is called sugar.
Gotcha. So I know you've been like a big advocate in this push against the no sugar advocacy in the Bay Area, I believe. Can you
around, yeah,
all around? Can you share some of your challenges, some of your hopefully some successes that you've had? Like, let us all know about what's happening, like behind the policy, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so sure.
Sorry, is that like a loaded question?
No, it's a very loaded question. But I'll do my best. So people always ask me, who are your detractors? Who's on the other side? And I chalk them up to the 4 Ds. Okay, there's the dinosaurs, okay, the deniers, the dilettantes, and the drug addicts. Okay, so the dinosaurs are people who basically can't learn anything new. Okay, and this actually goes for scientists and clinicians as well as the general public. You know, they're just stuck in their ways, or they're getting grant money to say the opposite, you know. The deniers, you know, who basically say, well, you know, it can't be this simple and everything is part of a balanced diet, you know, and they just can't, you know, accept the notion that, you know, this, I mean, right now there's this big fight going on in the obesity world, and it was on MedPage today and in the New York Times yesterday, and Ahad O'Connor reported on it just yesterday about a paper that my colleague David Ludwig and co-authors wrote about the carbohydrate insulin hypothesis. Okay, I actually subscribe to that hypothesis. I don't think the paper did the hypothesis justice, but nonetheless, you know, there are a whole bunch of people on the other side, you know, railing about, you know, the fact that calories are what's important, you know, but the fact of the matter is we have the data to show that that's not the case. All right. Then there's the dilettantes, you know, the people who are paid by the food industry to, you know, espouse their message. And a lot of them, unfortunately, are dietitians and nutritionists. All right. And they're basically taking money. And then finally, the drug addicts, who are, you know, people who say, you know, I can't, you know, I've got a sweet tooth, I can't give up my sugar, and, you know, I can try, but it's not going to work, you know. And so those are the people on the other side. But the question is, what's going on policy wise, you know, what's going on at the level of Sacramento or Washington? And there, you know, it's very clear that the food industry has, you know, shall we say, you know, greased the wheels. And they have paid people off. The American Legislative Exchange Council pays off 338 out of 535 congressmen, very specifically to keep the food industry, you know, solvent and, you know, where it is. You know, so no changes will be made in the Farm Bill. So, you know, in order, you know, no changes will be made in food subsidies, because that's, you know, the gravy train for the food industry. And those things are still going on, and we're doing our best to try to counter them. But, you know, money is money. Here in California, as you know, we had four municipalities that enacted soda taxes: San Francisco, Oakland, Albany, and I'm missing
Berkeley?
Berkeley, of course, Berkeley. How could I forget Berkeley? Right, Berkeley. Thank you. But no more. How come no more? Well, because Jerry Brown, before he left office, was actually pressured by the food industry, by the beverage industry. And what they ended up doing was passing a preemption law. And that preemption law basically said that no other municipality could do it. And actually, they would suffer a penalty if they tried. Well, guess what? 2 days ago, a federal judge declared that preemption unconstitutional. The provision that there would be a penalty. So now, basically, any municipality that wants to do a soda tax now can, you know, but they have to understand, and obviously they have to get, you know, the public support, etc. You know, and obviously, you know, the food industry, you know, pushes this notion that you know that soda taxes are regressive against the poor. You know, they're the ones who can least afford the soda tax. Yeah, you know what they also can least afford? They can least afford diabetes. All right. In fact, as a matter of fact, it is the least regressive, because it actually puts more money in their pockets to be able to buy, you know, something that won't kill them. So, you know, but you have to explain that in a rational fashion. And, you know, you have to actually have a marketing campaign that supports that, as Berkeley did, as San Francisco did. So, you know, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pushback.
Well, thank you for your work. We appreciate it. Another question for you about continuous glucose monitors. Like, I know kind of people we actually are going to be writing something about it through my Soulful Insights, some of this digital newsletter that we put out.
Right.
Can you just share what they are with the audience and just some of the benefits to them?
Sure. So diabetics have to check their blood glucose frequently. And so two companies in particular, both Dexcom and Abbott, you know, have come up with indwelling glucose monitors that attach to your skin, have little electrodes that go underneath your skin and can measure the glucose in the interstitial fluid and give you an online readout so that you can basically know what your blood glucose is basically at any time. And so it's very useful for diabetes. And we've, now published multiple papers, the medical profession has published multiple papers on the benefits of being able to adhere to a better dietary regimen based on your blood glucose. Well, if that's true for diabetics, maybe it's true for everyone, for non-diabetics. So a lot of biohackers, a lot of people who are trying to improve their own metabolic health, even if they don't have diabetes, are now using continuous glucose monitors to try to keep their blood glucose excursion as even as possible, like the slide I showed you, where the high fiber and the low carb are basically virtually identical. Well, you might learn something about yourself by knowing what your glucose does to different foods. And so various software companies have now come along to take advantage of this. I actually am an advisor to one of them called Levels Health. And again, I'm not here to promote them, but they were on my disclosure slide. And one of the reasons is because there seems to be a value to knowing what food does to your metabolism. And glucose is not the only thing you need to know, but it's here now. And, it is something that is, helpful. And so people are starting to do it. And, there are a lot of people who say, well, you don't need one. Well, you don't need one, but, it might be good to have one because it, tells you more than you knew before. And if you can use that information to actually make better choices, so much the better.
Are you finding that people that are using perhaps the glucose monitor that you are the advisor for, are they altering their lifestyle habits?
Oh, absolutely. They're being much more careful. They're being, much more fastidious about their food choices. They're being, they're using it in combination with intermittent fasting to be able to reverse a lot of these chronic metabolic diseases. People think these chronic metabolic diseases are sort of a fait accompli. They are not. You can reverse them. You can reverse all of them. Okay, but you can't reverse them if you don't fix your diet.
So in closing, let's just summarize briefly. So your mantra is protect the liver, feed the gut. So
Yep.
That's more whole food, much less processed food.
Right.
You're getting fiber, you're feeding your microbiome. So that's fruits, vegetables, whole grains, real food.
Well, whole grain doesn't have a definition. So there are a lot of things in the store that say whole grain that aren't. So you have to be very careful. There are some rules about whole grain. They're in the book as to what to do when you're faced with that question. Just because something says it's whole grain doesn't mean it is. And
then maybe we should just share with the audience, no juice, if we could avoid juice because we're not having fiber with the juice, you're just going to get a spike.
Right. Everyone says juice is healthy. Eat the fruit. Yep. Don't drink the juice. The juice is missing the fiber, and therefore it's basically just like a soda. Okay. How
about exercise? That's helpful for the mitochondria. Maybe you could just summarize.
Right. So exercise is absolutely essential. Exercise is one of the best things you can do for yourself. No argument. However, in the book, I talk about 8 subcellular pathologies. Okay. And we don't have time to go into them now because we have 1 minute. But only 4 of those subcellular pathologies are actually amenable to exercise. So exercise is very good, but you cannot outrun a bad diet.
Okay. How about just a few other things? How about stress reduction?
All good.
Okay.
Okay. And my other book, The Hacking of the American Mind, basically had a whole section on stress reduction because stress reduction by reducing cortisol reduces insulin and thereby improves metabolic health as well, for sure. Okay.
And then maybe let's just end with maybe sleep. Is there anything that
sleep is the exact same thing. Sleep, mindfulness, and exercise are the 3 things that you can do for yourself that will have inordinate, synergistic metabolic health benefits.
Right. It's interesting. I mean, we were in med school a little bit apart from each other, but sleep was never even mentioned.
Right.
And
Yep.
now it's like in the literature every day with a new study showing all the benefits to your immune system, to your
That's right.
cancer prevention, memory, etc.
Right. To prevent dementia, et cetera. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Great. All right, so guys, thank you, Dr. Lustig. This was awesome. I hope everyone got something really valuable from this talk. Follow up and buy Dr. Lustig's book. Check out eatreal.org. Hopefully you'll join the sugar challenge that they're supporting in November, and follow along all of our social medias and our websites, etc. And thank you so much.
Our pleasure.